Let's begin with a prayer. I've lit my votive candle. If you have one near you, it's always good to do that. Heavenly King and Comforter, the Spirit of Truth, everywhere present, filling all things, the treasure blessings and the giver of life, come and dwell in us, cleanse us of every stain, and save our souls, O gracious one. So everyone, it's good to have you here. Tonight, we're going to be introducing our new podcast, Path to the Priesthood. And its host is Christo Pappademos, who's with us here in San Francisco. I'm in San Jose. And let me just tell you a little bit about Christo first, and then we'll go into the actual meat of the program. Christo grew up as the son of a priest in Elk Grove, California, after graduating San Diego State University with a degree in political science. And after a brief stint as a high school football coach, Christo decided to attend Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology in Brookline, Massachusetts, to pursue the Holy Priesthood. Upon graduation, he returned to Elk Grove to work as a pastoral assistant for his father, Father Dino Pappademos, at the St. Catherine Greek Orthodox Church. After about 14 months of great experience fresh out of seminary, Christo moved on to become the pastoral assistant to Father Stephen Kyriakou at the Annunciation Greek Orthodox Cathedral of San Francisco. And for the past 2.5 years at the cathedral, Christo has served in many different areas. He hosts youth programs, handles administrative duties, assists in the holy services, works with the parish council, the Philoptochos, and participates on stewardship committees, the building committees, and all the fundraising. His favorite area of service comes in the form of his sermons, which he preaches every week. And by the grace of God, Christo hopes to continue learning as much as he can to continue serving God's people and churches for many years to come. Path to the Priesthood. That's the title of the new program. Each week, Christo is going to sit down with young, recently ordained priests or deacons and chat with them about their personal journey to the ordained ministry. In recent times, it seems that fewer and fewer young men choose to pursue the priesthood as a life path. And Christo is going to sit down in a very informal conversation with these young men and talk to them about this very, very important issue of the path to the priesthood. Christo, welcome. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Father Chris. It's good to be here.
And it's very good that you took on this topic. I know it very, very well. I served as the Dean of Admissions for many, many years. I traveled and visited, then over 300 parishes with students talking about the Holy Priesthood. And it was, I have to say, very, very important and influential when young men spoke to other young men about why they decided to go into the priesthood. Now then, we literally traveled in a motorhome around the country, and I had to drag my wife on that one, and sometimes my children even came. And we do a presentation in parishes, 30 presentations in 3 weeks in different parishes. But now technology allows us to go into the homes, and we don't need to go now through the motorhome craze. So Christo, let's start with a couple of questions. I mean, you grew up with a father who was a priest.
Yes.
But let's talk about what led you to your personal decision to pursue seminary and service in the church.
Sure. Right, as you mentioned, my dad is Father Dino Pappademos. He's the priest at the Church of St. Catherine in Elk Grove. And it's interesting growing up the son of a priest, at least for me, in my mind, there was only one priest, and that was Dad, right? No one else did this job. This was just a job that my dad did, and everyone else had other jobs. You know, that's how kids think, you know, this church is the only church, you know, on a small scale. So growing up, I never really thought much about it. And it wasn't until I moved away from my hometown and went to college, and I started attending St. Spiridon in San Diego, and I saw Father Andrew Skordalakis up at the altar, and I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, other people do this. You know, it's not just Father Dino, there's Father Andrew, and I'm sure there's other priests in other cities too. So that kind of, you know, opened my eyes to the reality that this is not just something that, you know, one man does. It can be done by other people as well. And so then it was, you know, but it was still always in the back of my mind. I continued with my studies in political science at San Diego State, never really with the intention of pursuing the priesthood. I had an older sister who went the business route. She went in sales. And I just thought I'd follow that. It seems to be what her and all her friends were doing. All my friends were going to, on to law school or to med school. And I was just thinking of a career like that.
Mhm.
And I don't want to say it was process of elimination, but on the interview track, as I was going on all these interviews to work on campaigns with people or to be in sales, I started to realize that maybe this wasn't the path for me. And my aha moment was on an interview with the company ADP, which they do payroll. And the man
Yes.
interviewing me, he was very smart. And I was in that young, innocent phase before you really learned how to interview. So I was simply just, I was not, let's say, I was not the best interviewee in that I was, answering things just kind of as they came to my mind. So the man asked me, the manager, whatever of the branch, well, Christo, would you say you have a passion for payroll? And I answered honestly. I said, no, I don't have a passion for payroll. And he said, well, why are you here? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. And so luckily he was very kind. And he said, more than just quickly turning me down for the job, I think he wanted to give me a bit of advice as a young guy. And he said, obviously I don't think this is probably the right path for you, but I encourage you to really sit down, think about what you are passionate about, and then pursue that path, because then you will never work again. He said any career you go through will be very difficult. There'll be very many challenges, but those challenges and difficulties are only worth it when you're in a field that you're passionate about. And so that's when that kind of whole church route and my dad being a priest, all that was kind of at the back of my mind, then came to the front of my mind as I sat
Okay.
down and thought what I was passionate about. And so that's what led me to the seminary, I would say.
Clearly, you had a great example in your father and
Yes.
your mother, and a great example in Father Andrew and the other priests that have served in the metropolis of San Francisco. Let's talk about when you were at the seminary.
Sure.
What did you learn about other young men's reasons for choosing the priesthood? Was there anything that sort of jumped out at you and surprised you?
That's a good question. And actually, it's one of the reasons that I had the idea to do this podcast, is that even though I made many friends at the seminary, I realized, I don't know if it's because you all get there, and once you do get to the seminary, you're very busy. There's a lot going on. You're adapting. I realized I really don't know why most of my other friends end up going to the seminary themselves, or how they got there. Maybe sometimes you talk to one or two guys about it, but most of my classmates across the board, you rarely sit down and have that specific conversation. But the few that I did have from their experiences, I realized that every person's path is completely different. Maybe there's a few similarities here and there, but across the board, it really is a case by case situation, case by case decision. No two paths were alike from the few conversations I did have. And that's why I thought it would be interesting for other people to hear of specific stories of paths to the priesthood. And even for me, really, to reconnect with these friends that I made at the seminary and actually ask them, now that we've finished the seminary, why did you, or what led you to the seminary in the first place? Yeah.
Clearly there's a special bond that happens at the school. I know, got to meet you and got to meet your other classmates when I taught there, the pastoral theology class, no, pastoral theology, rather, the
Pastoral
church
care
class.
or administrative, and then you also did the parish admin too.
And parish admin, yeah. And you could see when I gave each of you your projects to do that you each had your own mind about what was important. What was that sort of sweet spot in your heart for ministry? And that, seems to blossom out each time, because as you said, all of us are different. What do you think some things are that, let's say, non-seminarians and lay people might not know about the behind the scenes life of a young priest or a deacon?
That's a good question too. The behind the scenes of a young priest or deacon. I think the first the first thing that people might not know, like everybody knows the Greek world itself is very small, but then the church world, I would say, is even a bit smaller. So even though we're all spread out, we're quite well connected. And what I think people aren't aware of is how good of friends we all actually are, which is part of the reason why I'm able to even offer this podcast, is because of this, network of brothers that that is formed when you're at the school. And it's probably one of the most important things about the school. A lot of people, would think, oh, can I attend from, can I do classes online? Can I take classes in Greece and transfer? But really, when you do those things, you lose out on the opportunity to form this brotherhood that is so important to all of us, because we're kind of on islands once you get out of the seminary. And we're on a unique side of ministry that not a lot of other people are in. So it's nice to be able to reach out and lean on those brothers that are far away. So that is one of the things I think parishioners identify the priesthood with, maybe one parish priest, or like their childhood parish priest that they grew up with, and there really is like a good solid web of people out there with different talents and different fortes. And so I think that's like behind the scenes. People might not know that larger pool is out there. So
Okay.
that's one thing. And then the other thing I would say is that humor is big behind the scenes. Like a lot of these, the ways we stay in touch is through similar interests. Like mine is a football fan group that I'm in, and so we're talking about football. And so the other behind the scenes thing is that we're all pretty much normal people, normal guys, and that's what bonds us as well.
Okay. I want to make sure that our guests know that they can send in questions to Noel. They can put them up in the chat. You can go through our social media channels as well. Noel is there coordinating for us. Thank goodness she's here every week. And I'm hoping that if you have, I don't know if we can go to questions yet from outside, Noel, or should we just stay with my questions for Christo?
We have one question so far.
Okay.
Did Christo know any seminarians that were infrequent churchgoers before that were then called to the priesthood? And if so, what motivated them?
That's interesting. Personally, let me think. So guys who were infrequent in their home church, let's say, but then became seminarians. Okay, I would say maybe not every guy at the seminary probably didn't go to church every Sunday, but in some capacity they were involved in their church or church life, whether it be through a summer camp, through an Ionian village type of a thing. I would say each guy had some kind of connection to their church, even though it might not have been that they were simply in their church every Sunday. But yeah, that is a good question. Yeah, there definitely were, I would say, guys that not as regular, but still went to the seminary.
And there could also be men, I'm sure you've heard of this, Christo, that they are very excited about going into the priesthood, and then something happens in their life that takes them off a track in a different location. And many times we used to call it the stirring of the heart, that once God stirs that heart, it's very, very difficult to deny that stirring, to deny that calling. There's also the real world that is sometimes very, very cruel. And young men will sit there and say, well, wait a minute, where is this loving God? What happened to that loving God when I see this, and this happen? That can also steer a young man away. We used to speak about the 3 Ps: peer pressure, parental pressure, and parish pressure. So the peer was, I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm a lawyer. That's great. What do you want to be? I want to be a priest. What? Why would you do that? Yeah. That's crazy. Or you hear the parents who say, oh, no way. My father told me, he said, you lost your mind? Because you're going to go become a priest? Why? Look at the way they treat their priest. I don't want you to do that.
Yeah.
And then there's also the parish pressure, which is the gossip and the things that go on in a parish. But I think we all have to realize that we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a fallen world, and we are called to create that heavenly kingdom on earth. So there can be things that can push a young man away. But the key is to make sure that what you're talking about, Christo, that we open that lane of conversation so that people can begin to talk about it very openly. Let's see if we have any other questions from outside.
Yeah, another question was, is it even possible to do seminary online? I'm thinking it's not, but I actually don't know the answer to that. And maybe also just say more about, online versus in-person experience.
Sure. Well, I can speak from the time that I was there, which was obviously pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, there was no online option for seminary. I know there was a Diaconate program that maybe you could, as like a second career type of Diaconate program, guys who have careers and they're working in remotely, they, do certain works and assignments for the Diaconate program. But I know when I was there, definitely there was not an online option. Now, in the new reality that we're living in of COVID, I've heard that there are, guys were working at their home parishes, but then still connected and taking classes through Zoom. I don't know what the situation is there now, Father Chris. You might know better than I do. And then I think the second part of the question was the virtual experience versus the in-person. And I think where the virtual experience, although you have great professors that have great lessons to teach, what you miss out on is those 10 minutes before class and after class when it's just you and your classmates. And I will say, those are some of the most memorable moments at the seminary, the 10 minutes before a big test or something, or before a big lecture, when you're actually just engaging with your fellow seminarians and either just catching up, but it's a very unique time where you're going through something very specific, but you also have a group of about 10 or 15 other guys going through it with you. And so I feel like that would be lost in a virtual experience. Yeah,
to sort of tag team with that, I would say that there is a virtual component that has come about as of COVID, but my information that I have saying that this is not the way to go for the Master of Divinity program, someone who would study for the priesthood, simply because it's part of being there on campus, going to chapel, all that formation, living with other people in the dormitory, all of that is something that cannot be repeated online. So I would think, and I feel I can confidently say that that's not an option right now. It's sort of an option now, is taking some classes here and there, but I know that that's not the optimum situation. Now, there's no reason why you can't take classes online with other things, with other theological questions and things of that nature. But for the priesthood, it's something that's very, very difficult to do. Let me go. You want to add anything to that, Christo, or is that good?
No, that was perfectly said. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about, we used to see, I remember when I was at admissions, about 30 young men that would come every year, maybe half in the college, half in the School of Theology. But those numbers go up and down. Sometimes they go down quite a bit. Why do you think it is that fewer young men today are pursuing the priesthood? What could we do to prepare young people better to consider the vocation of the priesthood?
That's a good question. I think one of the factors, there's definitely a few of them, but one of them is as society becomes, I feel, more focused on kind of, appearances, talking about things like social media and, trying to achieve more money, get a nicer house, live in a nicer area, go on more vacations than your friends, keeping up with, there's a competition to achieve now more than I think there used to be. We used to be kind of about the American dream or what have you. And now it's more really, make as much money as you possibly can. And of course, when it comes to the priesthood, that is not the career to get into when that is kind of like the overall theme, when all of your friends are talking about, I can work this few of hours and make this much money. And like, those are the conversations that I hear, at least with my friends from outside the church world, shall we say, is how to work as least as possible, but make the most amount of money as possible. And if you want to do not a lot of work and make a lot of money, then the priesthood obviously is quite the opposite of that, I would say.
Wait a minute. Priests only work 9 to 5 a couple days a week, and they go golfing all the time. Is that true? It's not the truth, right?
one day a week. And as Father Kostef Safiu is a veteran retired priest here in the Bay Area, when I was a seminarian, I was telling me, geez, Father, everyone's telling me like, well, what do you even do during the week? Don't priests work once a day? And he said, when they give you the whole don't priests work once a day, you give them, actually, it's only half a day, because it's just liturgy is really done by noon and I'm out of there. So, but yeah, no, obviously, and as Father Chris knows better than anyone, really, Sunday, you might say, is the simplest day sometimes, because then during the week we're cranking through administrative things, managing donations and stewardship and all that type of stuff. But
and the other thing too is that people really don't want to be talked at today. They want someone who is going to listen to them, and the priest has the greatest ear available, and hopefully the biggest heart to begin to help people who live in that world you were explaining, that spectacular versus the sacred. That doesn't mean the spectacular world is not good and fine, right. You can enjoy it, but the sacred world gives us so much more. It's so much more fulfilling than the other. The other is fleeting, and the priest has to prepare himself during his time at seminary and before and after to be able to be that huge hearing center and that healing center with Christ's help, to be able to help people today. It's not an easy vocation. We have to be honest about it. It's not easy, but with God's help, many, many things are possible.
Right.
Let's talk about what you're hoping to learn and discuss in your new program, Path to the Priesthood.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm most excited about with this new podcast is finding ways for different people to connect to, different signs from God. Like I talked a little bit about earlier with the few guys I had talked about their paths. Each one was so different. And I feel like for people out there now in the, the college, post-college world, as they're finding their life paths, they will connect to different people for different reasons, which is why I think it's so important to have like a wide variety of young clergymen to share their stories. And because what I had that I feel like most people from maybe a clergy family will not have is I always had it in the back of my mind from my dad. A lot of people think, okay, the son of a priest, so he automatically will go on to become a priest, but obviously that's not the case. We can talk about that a little later, but I at least had it in the back of my mind. So what I'm hoping through this new podcast is that the stories that my friends will share will maybe put this in the back of some people's minds that would have not had it in the first place. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping to, because the call to the priesthood is a very personal, very spiritual thing. And so of course we're not out here saying like, you should go be a priest, you should go be a priest. It's just at least creating the kind of the opportunity for God to work his way and speak to people in ways that might work for them.
And to talk about it, you're going to speak about this sort of path that people could choose. Yeah. And many times we're not even talking about that path. Right now, we're just so interested in, we've got our COVID issues, which is mammoth all over the world. Yeah. You've got, that has changed people's lives. It's changed the way we worship. There's a lot going on. So this sort of honing that path that would give people the ability to learn from you and from your classmates and others. What is the priesthood and why did they choose to do what they do? I think is extremely important, and I thank you for doing it. I think, Noel, we have a couple of other questions, so let me go back to you and you can help us there.
Thank you. So first question is, what would you advise to someone who's trying to discern between the diaconate versus the priesthood?
That's an interesting question because different people think about diaconate and priesthood in different ways. Now, for me, the diaconate would be a temporary position where whenever the time is right, like I would then move on to pursue the priesthood. But some people definitely choose the diaconate and remain at the diaconate level if they maybe want to have another career or something like that, which seems to work well for a lot of people in a lot of spaces. There's a lot of churches that need help. They might not necessarily have the funds to take on a full second time clergyman, but this kind of for lack of a better term, a weekend deacon, which works for the deacon himself because he's got his job and he can serve the church on Sunday. And it works for the church because they don't have to pay another full-time salary, but they still get that extra help on Sunday, which a lot of priests need. So, it's hard to say, oh, how would you, it's hard to recommend one or the other for a certain person. I think that's also, again, a very personal decision, depending on the way someone's life is at a certain time. Again, for me, as a younger guy, I would be a deacon for a while until I'm ready to move to the priesthood. And because deacon is also a time of learning too. So for me, depending on how much practice, shall we say, I'd like to get before I'm serving by myself, that would dictate how much time I'd spend as a deacon. So it's different for everybody to say, yeah.
And discerning with your local parish priest, you meet with him, you meet with your hierarchy in your area, and you'd have that discussion about what works best. The two roles are distinct, yet they are part of the deacon, priest, bishop roles that we know of, but it's something that takes great discernment. Christo's right. Other questions?
Yeah, I want to do a follow-up to that real quick, just a technical question. Is it possible, or do you ever see someone go for the diaconate, not necessarily express an intention to go into the priesthood, and then decide to move from the diaconate to the priesthood? How often is that, and how difficult is that if you didn't initially express the intent of becoming a priest?
Is that directed to me or to Christo?
Both. I'm just wondering.
Well, Christo, you want to take a stab at it?
I'm trying to think specifically, someone who intended only for diaconate but ended up full-time, ordained as a priest full-time. I can't think of anyone who started as a deacon per se, but I do know of, there was a priest in Boston when I was a seminarian. I was assigned to his church, and he was interesting because he was he was an involved layman, a man from Greece, and the Metropolitan actually strongly suggested that this man pursue the priesthood. So there's an example from layman that wasn't really expecting or thinking it, but the Metropolitan kind of put it in his ear, and he came to the realization himself. But as a deacon going to priest, I can't think of any cases or people that I know personally. Father Chris, maybe you.
There are young men who study in the diaconate program, and that diaconate program at Holy Cross right now is a very good, very robust program. But it's also something that, the amount of knowledge that's necessary for a person to be a full-time pastor, priest in the parish is different from the diaconate. It's two different roles with two different sets of requirements. And those who are in the diaconate, if they want to be full-time priests, they need to go to the theological school and complete their degrees there so that when they leave, then they can go on as full-time priests. So it's not so cut and dry, but there are men, I saw that when I served had the honor to serve as president of our theological school in college. I did see young men who made that choice. I also saw young men who left. They said, this was not for me. And the key is to do that before the ordination.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do. Make sure you know what you're doing.
Right.
Others?
Next question I have is, do you have any observations about the differences between candidates who go pursuing the priesthood directly, like going right from high school with the intention of becoming a priest and going through their education with that intent, versus someone who had prior education in a different field or even a whole career in a different field and decided to switch? Do you have any observation about the differences between those two paths?
That's a good question, because I would say there's an equal amount of both of those. There are young men who at like a very early age decide for sure, I'm going to be a priest. I know that I would like to pursue the priesthood. And so after high school, they will attend college at Hellenic College, which then allows them for a 3-year program in the School of Theology as opposed to a full 4-year program. And, it's interesting. So one of my best friends at the seminary took this route, and I actually took the different route. As we heard earlier in my bio, I went to San Diego State first, so I came in later after the fact. And observations about differences, everybody's got, there's the priest of the heart and there's the brain of the heart. And where I will say the guys who do go to do the 4 years at Hellenic College, yes, they are like up a little bit more on the fathers and on, the dogmas of the church, and um, they do have a jump on church history and things like that from being in the environment longer. But the priest of the heart, although it varies from person to person, um, is generally, is generally unchanged versus if you went to a regular college or you went to Hellenic college, that priest of the heart is always there. So observations, book smarts, they might have a leg up on us, I will say, but I will say, the heart factor is the same across the board, and all those guys become really good friends regardless. I'm just as good of friends of guys who went to Hellenic. I'm just as good as friends of guys who went to other colleges, and it all kind of gets smoothed out in the school of theology or the seminary. But yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, and the other reality is that there's a lot to learn. I mean, you're talking about Byzantine music, you're talking about ancient Greek, modern Greek, Hellenistic Greek, you're talking about the fathers, you're talking about scripture. So even the 7 years, I remember speaking with my professor, the late, really very much respected Father Harrikus.
Yeah.
And in my senior interview, he said, well, you don't know this, and you don't know this, and you don't know this. And he said, you've got the rest of your life to learn it, like I did. He said, you can only learn so much. And the professors can only give you so much. They give you the keys to unlock the doors into those treasures of our faith. And the key is to take advantage of those. So those who are there for 7 years, yes, Christo, I agree with you that they have more knowledge, they're able to do more, but those who come in 4 years are able sometimes to pick up and even exceed that.
Definitely.
But even 7 years, folks, it's not a lot to prepare someone to give their entire life to Christ.
Yeah.
That is a very huge step. It is a life of service, period. That's all it is. There's no glory in it. There's no crowns that come with it. The only crown we get is really the crown of thorns.
Yeah.
And that could be very, very difficult for most people. So you have to be prepared to get out there. Let's see if we have any more questions.
So the next question is,
Questions, good.
yeah, we have a lot of questions today. And if you have more questions, feel free to leave them in the chat and Zoom or on social media. But the next question is, did the experience of seminary change your perspective on the priesthood in any way?
That's an excellent question too. And it definitely did. It 100% did. Before the seminary, you come from a very limited world or a limited view of the church, and you have your parish priest and you have your parish, and your first year at the seminary was, at my church we do it this way, at my church we do it this way. So the seminary, like Father mentioned, the treasures, right? So there are definitely treasures on the parish level, but the seminary compiles all these treasures, or at least introduces you to the people who can direct you to go find more treasures. So it's kind of like, okay, at your parish, you're swimming in a pool, let's say, and then the seminary takes you to the open sea, the open waters. And there's, and then even from the seminary, there's, beyond there, you can go to Greece, Constantinople, and there's plenty to learn other places. So it definitely changed my view of the priesthood. And I quickly began to realize that the priesthood was much, much more than I ever thought it could be. And that's coming from growing up the son of a priest, being at church every Sunday myself as an altar boy. So if it changed my view on the priesthood, it could and should change everyone's view on the priesthood, because if the seminary doesn't change your view on the priesthood, then there's a disconnect there. There's either you maybe missed something, or anyway, yeah, it should change your view on the priesthood, because that's pretty much exactly what it's meant to do, Father. If you have,
that's good.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's any others. I have one more.
So talking about discernment a little bit and what discernment actually looks like, is it more of, obviously I'm assuming it's both intellectual and spiritual, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how those elements play out, the intellectual decision about, is this the right path for me in life? And then spiritually reflecting, on what you feel called to do.
Can you run that by me one more time, Noel?
Yeah. So the question is about, is it more of an intellectual decision or a spiritual decision to, when you're discerning the priesthood? Obviously, you're using your mind to decide what you're going to do, but how do those two components of the decision play out?
That's an excellent question, because in life, I feel like everything is a balance of your intellectual side and your spiritual side, and using those together to make the decision. Because spiritually, you could feel that it's right for you and everything like that, but intellectually, if you're at a place in your life where you're not able to commit for 4 years, or to really to put things on hold and really go all in, then it's not going to pan out. So you can have all the spiritual motivation, but intellectually, you have to actually decide, can I do this? Should I do this? Is this right for me in my life? And so it's a coming together of realizing God's hand in your own life, how he's guided you to a certain point, but then you yourself have to make the decision, okay, yes, I am going to go for this. It's at least that's how it was for me. It was a coming together of the two, again, through the interviews, and intellectually making a life decision. I knew, okay, my life is taking a path right now. My life is about to change, and the way it's going to change is going to be for a very long time. It's going to be it's a career path. And so that is, we don't call the priesthood a career really, but intellectually you could say that it is, because this is going to be your career. So it's a coming together of those two things. And it's a balance of those. And that's an excellent question though. Yeah. I hope I answered it.
The glorious thing about the priesthood, and many times we don't uplift the priesthood enough and tell people that this is a worthy vocation for young men to pursue. And I don't know of any other place in the universe where you can receive the type of blessings, the type of strength, the type of inner peace as you can as a priest. The priest, as Christo knows through his father, is present for many, many parts of people's lives. I mean, what an honor to be present at someone's baptism, someone's wedding, someone's chrismation, to go to the hospital and to be with them when they're ill, to be with them when they come back from a catastrophic issue that goes on, when they're standing next to the family as the family is viewing their family member for the last time on the solea in the casket, and you are there and you can hear the last words that people are uttering to a family member. I don't know, I really don't know a greater honor. Now, there's many, many difficulties in the priesthood, there's no doubt about it, but that goodness so far outweighs any of the difficulties that might be in time, All right, let's do one more question from outside, and then I've got a question, and then we'll finish up for tonight. This has been great. A great introduction to Christo's new podcast, Path to the Priesthood, which he's going to take off from here with many, many people around the country, maybe even around the world, and speak to them about this path to the priesthood. That's very important that we share with the world these days. Noel, any others?
So the question that's in the chat, and maybe I'll expand it a little bit, is about, was there anyone that left a very fruitful or lucrative vocation and then entered the seminary? Did they seem maybe more enthusiastic for having made that sacrifice? And then maybe just talk in general about anyone that that had just a major life shift like that. I know we talked a little bit about people leaving from other vocations, but if you could speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a good question too. And I have one faint memory, because this person, I believe, was in there last year when I was in my first year. And, the cars in the parking lot at the seminary are not the nicest cars. We just, I had the car I learned to drive on was a beat up pickup truck. And that's the car I had at the seminary. But, there's one car in the parking lot. It was an Audi. And it was like, it was a nice Audi. And we just like, man, whose car is that? Now, meanwhile, this was like my first semester at the seminary. And there also happened to be a very good deacon at the time. And when I say good, I mean like he would serve the services, he would serve Vespers every night, and his, petitions were excellent. His had very good presence, very spiritual, very prayerful. And come to find out, it took me a while to find out, like months later, that Audi belonged to that deacon. And I apparently, like, the deacon used to be a very successful restaurateur in New York. And but again, that was a fleeting memory for me, because his last year, maybe even last semester, was my first semester. So that was a case of, and again, who knows if this is true or not, but Archbishop Demetrius at the time, I guess, knew this man and recognized something in him, and kind of put it in his ear, why don't you think about ordained ministry? And so, and there was a man, and it was interesting to me, I mean, it kind of made sense, like, the way he went about serving the services was to the nines. Like he was really fully into the services, and I was like, oh, that makes sense that he was successful in his prior career, because he probably did everything to the nines, and he took that same mentality. I assume, I never spoke to him about this, but he took the same mentality that brought him success in the restaurant world and brought that to his ministry. But yeah, that's a good question.
Very good. Very good. Well, Christo, I have one more question for you, and then we're going to have to call it quits for tonight. But folks, again, the Path to the Priesthood is going to be on probably every other week. And Christo will be speaking to young men around the world, primarily here in the United States of America, who will talk about their path to the priesthood. Let me ask you this, Christo, as a final question. If you were to give a message to young people who are considering joining and going to the seminaries, whether it be St. Vladimir's or Holy Cross for the Diaconate or the priesthood, what would you say to them?
That's an excellent question. Now, considering these are people that have made the decision to go, it sounds like, or that are
those who are sort of that there's something that's stirring in their heart. They know that something's going on. They love being at church. They love being in the altar. They may even heard something that said, Charlie, Sam, Constantine, think about this. Think about this magnificent path to the heavenly kingdom that you can serve.
Got it. Well,
Got
it. That makes sense. If that's the experience or the feeling that some people have, I would say to one, definitely act on that feeling. Don't let it go by the wayside, because there's probably something real there. I would say act on that feeling, and then I would say to do so with humility. I would say humility will save you at the seminary. It will save you in your ministry, because again, coming from your own specific parish, you have the vision of the priesthood as one way, but along the way, you will find a bunch of different challenges, thrills, rewards, risks, whatever, things you never knew would be a part of that world. And I would say through humility, you would be able to not only, endure them all, but have them affect you positively, right? Like there's, being on this side, obviously I'm not ordained yet. I'm still a pastoral assistant, but there are a lot of things that I never thought would be, in the job description, shall we say, not that we have them, but like a lot of things I never thought would be in the wheelhouse of ministry. And it's really only through humility that you can process all of those things and take them on one at a time, learn the things in your classes at the seminary one at a time, study for your tests one at a time. Then when you get out, address the different events of the church one at a time. Even the services and through Lent and Holy Week one at a time. So act on that feeling that you have. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are it's probably something that's already been on your mind. And then to do so with humility, and I think you'll be on a pretty good path yourself.
Very good. Thank you, Christo. Thanks very much for offering this. I'll say a closing prayer. Noel and I have a couple of brief announcements that we'll make, but I hope and pray you will, those of you who are listening tonight, whether you be in the Zoom call, on social media, that you will pass this information on to those people who are young, who are considering the priesthood, or maybe just they're beginning to consider paths that they might take in life. And let's make the priesthood as one of those that they will. Lord, now let your servants depart in peace, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared for all people, a light to enlighten the Gentiles, and the glory of your people, Israel. Amen.